Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Watson Michael from Ceylon Institute of English and Leadership. And once again, we have with us Dr. Robert Adams, also known as Dr. Bob. So Dr. Bob, he's a retired Navy SEAL commander and a retired Delta Force colonel. And one of the most interesting part is that he became a doctor of medicine at the age of 40 while having 2 kids. And another very, very important thing is he's the author of 3 best-selling books, which are currently being sold in 13 countries. And it's available on Amazon Kindle as well. Also, he belongs into the special elite men like David Goggins. So Dr. Bob, we're going to talk about leadership and your 40+ experience in senior positions. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you very much. Glad to be back with you.
Absolutely. So let's start with something a bit interesting. So can you tell me about, it's a different topic, your shoes need work.
Well, and just so your audience knows, we've already had these conversations about interesting leadership experiences in my younger years. And so I'm kind of chronologically, letting you feed me the lead in lines. And this one is one of my favorites because I went to the Naval Academy in 4 years trying to learn about leadership. Everything you learn in a book doesn't work when you actually get in front of men and you have to lead them. And this story begins with my first real assignment on a destroyer in the Pacific Ocean as the first lieutenant. I had asked to be a division officer. They gave me the job, and I am going to do my very first inspection of my men. Okay. And with me is my senior enlisted man, a chief petty officer, and the platoon is lined up in front of me on the front of the ship. We're in the most forward part of the ship, and the only thing that's up there is the anchor chains and the room underneath us that the anchor chains go into. And I'm walking along with the chief leading the way, and it's, you've seen officers inspect their men, and that's what I'm doing. First time I've ever done it. I get to about the 3rd man in line, and I look down at his uniform. I get to his shoes, and I go, your shoes need work. Now that's an officer telling you, listen, man, you should have polished them better. Instead of saying, yes, sir, he looks at me and he goes, well, yours don't look too good either.
Wow.
And my eyes went like this, and the chief looked over at me and he says, without hesitation, he goes, sir, could you excuse this young man and I for a minute? We're in formation. And, I don't know what to do. So I go, well, sure, chief. And he goes, come with me. And the chief and this enlisted man, junior enlisted man, go down into the hole in the ship where the anchor chains are. And I hear this whang, as he's obviously being thrown from one side of the room to the other. And I'm thinking, okay, and the whole platoon's standing at attention. I'm standing at attention, and the kid comes walking back up a little unsteady on his feet, gets back in line, stands at attention. Chief comes up, stands next to me. Not a word is said, and we continue the inspection. Now that story, I've thought of many times over the years because I never spoke to the chief petty officer about it. He never spoke to me about it, but I learned real quickly in certain leadership situations, words are not enough. You need to let them know you're serious. And the chief absolutely let him know that he was serious. And, I didn't have too many trouble with the men after that.
Wow, for that guy, my goodness, just imagine him, right? Look, you're telling
but that's the leadership lesson. Look, sometimes you need to use force to get the point across. I don't mean slap somebody in the face like you do in the movies, but, done quietly and carefully in a way that people can understand.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure this young man understood that what he did was not the right way to do it.
Absolutely. Right. So let's go into something. It's about beach mapping in cold water. Assume you learn what matters.
This is another great story because after being on that ship for 1.5 years and learning from this chief petty officer about officer and enlisted relationships and leadership at that level, I went on to become a Navy SEAL, as you've already told them.
Yeah.
Then my very first assignment, is another first assignment story,
Mm-hmm.
was platoon commander of
Oh.
a group of Navy SEALs, 22 of us. And I had myself and another senior officer in charge of some of the world's best fighting men that have ever been and may ever will be. And we were doing a training one day that is called beach mapping, where we get into the icy cold Pacific waters, and two men on the shore hold poles that the swimmers can line up on, and then we move it 5 yards down, 5 yards down, and each time they move, the men drop a weighted line down, they measure the depth, write it on their tablet, and we're mapping the beach and how deep it is going all the way out, 10 men out. Well,
interesting.
What I did that day, I did instinctually. I grabbed my 2 junior enlisted men and I said, you guys get up here and hold the poles. My other officer and I are going to get in the water and we're going to do the soundings. And because I knew as a leader that if you don't do what you ask your men to do, you lose respect. But when we were done with that, and it was cold water and I was shivering with the rest of them, and the 2 junior guys on the beach going, hey, this is pretty cool. Normally the officers do this. But we got out and we finished the mission. Nothing was said, but 2 of my men came up to me and said, sir, we've never seen an officer do that before.
Wow.
And we want you to know that we appreciate it. And we will follow you now more likely than we would if you just, gave us orders without setting that kind of example.
Wow.
So that's the leadership lesson there. If you're going to ask your men to do something hard, they need to know you're willing to do it with them.
I remember interesting stories in 6 Days Impossible, right? I'll come back to that, right? So, and another one is like, can you help me write my platoon evaluations?
Okay, this story is officer to officer in the Navy. Now I have been promoted. I've been assigned in the Philippines as an operations officer, overseeing a number of operational units that are training in the Philippines. And one of the junior officers, an O1, an ensign, the lowest ranking officer comes to me and he's in between training events. And I've got a desk job and he's out there in the field. And he goes, hey, sir, I'm really busy. And I got like 7 guys on my platoon, and I got to write all these evaluations. I got to get them to San Diego so they can get, in their records and get it promoted. And I'm such a bad writer. Will you help me write their evaluations? Well, I said, sure, these are junior enlisted men. Mostly we say the same things. They look good, they work hard, etc. And so he went off to do his training that day, and I took his men's name, and on a piece of lined paper, I wrote standard good job stuff on each man. And at the end of each one, I added a little joke sentence because I knew that he was going to read them and personalize them and make them his. And at the end, it had, joke sentences like, and we know he supports the Navy's equal opportunity goals because he's with all the bar girls every night, which obviously is not going to go on his evaluation. And he had to scratch that out. And he did it. Well, unfortunately, this young ensign just took my pieces of paper, mailed them back to San Diego without even reading them or editing them, written in my handwriting. And the next day, he gets a call from the commanding officer of a combat SEAL team in San Diego, goes, you are relieved of your duties, return to San Diego immediately. I go, what did you do? And he told me he sent them back without reading them. I go, oh no, because there was a bad sentence at the bottom of every one of those. And the Navy takes these, listed evaluations very seriously. He goes, I don't think I'm ever going to get promoted again. I go, well, the lesson there is it's okay to ask people for help, but don't pass the responsibility that comes with your job onto somebody else. If you ask for help, use the help, thank for the help, but by goodness, you better double check what they gave you, because it almost never would be as good as you could do yourself.
Absolutely, because this reminds me when I was in corporate, I work with some people, so they used to mark time. They were very responsible. They used to pass the ball. So it reminds me of that. And some people got
Sure.
lucky actually, and they survived. Right. Okay. So,
Just like in the military, it's in corporate also.
absolutely. So you and your men are assigned extra duty for being late to morning formation. Could you elaborate on that?
All right, I'm back from the Philippines now. I'm a full lieutenant in 03. I'm in charge of my platoon. And every morning in the SEAL teams in San Diego, we start at 7 o'clock with a formal formation. The commanding officer, the chief petty officer, take reports from the officers again. All my men are present and accounted for. But I wasn't there to report because I was 5 minutes late to formation with two of my men. And I don't remember why we were late, just that we were. But we came scooting in, stood there, formation goes, announcements are given, and commanding officer dismisses everybody. And the senior enlisted man comes up to me and says, "Sir, the commanding officer wanted me to tell you that you and your two men that were late for formation are now assigned a weekend extra duty here at the unit." And I thought about it. Now, unfortunately for the commanding officer, he had sent me to school to become the command's legal officer. And so I had to study the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and I had to make sure that I knew what was legal and what was not. And unfortunately, that order was not a legal order. So I told the chief, I said, "Chief, I understand we screwed up. I'm sorry, but you need to go back and tell the commanding officer that I'm going to instruct my men not to follow his order." And he looks at me like, "What? I'm not going to go back and tell the commanding officer of the SEAL team that you're not going to follow his order?" And I said, "It's an illegal order. We can't follow it." And he goes, "Hey, Lieutenant, let me tell you how this is going to go down. You go tell the commanding officer you're not going to follow his order." Well, the unfortunate situation here is I'm one of the guilty parties. So it kind of looks like I'm trying to get out of it myself. But I wasn't. I had to make a very difficult decision to take care of my men, even though it made me look horrible. So I went into the commanding officer after I pulled out the big booklet called the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and I found the paragraph in there that says, "You can't do this, for two reasons. You can't order extra duty to anybody without due process. So you have to have a court martial. You have to allow us to, explain, mitigating circumstances, then decide whether we're guilty. And if we're guilty, give out penalty. But even then, under no circumstances can the penalty in the military be to do extra duty, because that is a position of responsibility and can be never given as punishment. So I had to go now this 05 commanding officer, combat stud, and say, "Sir, I'm not going to follow your order. It's illegal," which is exactly what I did as respectfully as I could. And I thought he was going to come across the table at me. He goes, "I'm going to kill you." I go, "What? No, sir, wait, no, time out. I got the Uniform Code of Military Justice here. I'm just here to tell you, remember, you sent me to legal school. I'm here to tell you, you can't do that legally as the commanding officer." He goes, and he stepped back and he goes, "What the hell am I supposed to do?" I said, "Well, sir, let me show you the paragraph here. It says what you're supposed to do. You are supposed to court-martial us, or option." And he goes, "I don't have time for that." He said, "I'm a busy guy." I said, "Well, sir, here it is in the book again. It's your only option. And I'm your legal advisor. And I recommend you listen to what I said, or I'm going to court-martial with it." So he goes, "Damn it, Adams, get him in here." And, I was a nervous wreck. I was shaking and shivering, but I made a decision that even though it made me look bad, which it clearly did, I needed to protect both my commanding officer from doing something he's not allowed to do, which he learned from and he never did again, and my men, because I'm their platoon leaders and I didn't want them punished without due process. And life went on, and we all learned from it. Even senior leadership learned from it.
Wow. Inspiring. It's all about leadership. Wow. So the next one is, let's look at bet you wish you did not push the send button.
Okay, so this is kind of my final concluding story on leadership issues between senior officers, because now we're going to fast forward to me being finished I went to medical school, joined the Army, made it all the way up to full bird colonel, got assigned to the Army's Delta Force, as you mentioned, and I am now a senior officer, the same rank as the commanding officer, a full bird colonel, that commands the Army's Delta Force.
Yeah.
And for people that don't know what the Delta Force is, just like the SEAL teams, these guys are the nation's, the world's most highly skilled fighting force. And you can't even describe how scary they are. And their commanding officers is the ultimate scary guy. And on this particular day, I'm feeling like a colonel. I got a bunch of men in my medical department that works for me. And I send out a classified email on our secure computer system, which is classified secret. I can put any kind of secret stuff I want on there. But the email I sent, unfortunately, contained top secret information, which means I had immediately violated the security requirements of my job. And within minutes of my pushing the send button to send that message to my men, the information technology guys were in my office going, "Sir, you just sent a top secret message on a secret system. We're here to clean out your hard drive, clean out the hard drives of all the men you send it to. And oh, by the way, the commanding officer would like to speak with you right now." I went, oh no, because I didn't think it through before I pushed the send button. And the good news was I was very valuable to the organization. They needed me as much as I wanted to keep my job. And the commanding officer called me in, and he already knew what he was going to do, because he wanted me, needed me, and we were senior officers talking to each other. I sit down in his office, I sit there quietly, and he waits a minute, and then he looks at me and he goes, "Bet you wish you didn't push the send button." And I've never forgotten that. Yeah, it's just like slapped in the face. Okay, you're reminding me that I've learned what I should and should not do. You've done it very professionally and quietly. And he gave me a couple more comments about the importance of security. And I said, I know, I know, I screwed up. And he goes, "Get back to work. Please don't make me have this conversation with you again." And I've never forgotten that. And we are still very good friends to this day. He's retired, I'm retired, and we've stayed in touch over the years. But the lesson there, in the computer world we live in, it's really easy to push the send button and say something or do something before you really should do it.
It's fragile.
Particularly when you're talking to people that you work for or work with, because those emails never go away.
Yes, that's true. Because it's just a click of a button. You can't recall it back sometimes. So
that's true. Words that you say, they never come back. You can't pull them back in again. So watch what you say and watch what you send.
Absolutely. And before we go to any final comments, I would like to say something. If you all have not read the book 6 Days Impossible, I would suggest you all to buy that book and read it, right? So there are some things, I'm not going to mention that on the podcast, but there were some things where I couldn't help control laughing, right? So I got to know, how you embarrassed the instructor on your first or second week, right? So
I'm not going to tell that story again. You never read it.
Right. So, and you had to become a sand cookie, right? You call it sand cookie?
A what?
A sand cookie. You had to cover yourself in sand.
Oh yeah, sugar cookie.
Sugar cookie, right?
We had to become sugar cookies. We get soaking wet and then roll in the sand, so we're covered with sand. That was one of the standard training punishments. Yep.
Well, Dr. Bob had many other punishments, right? So it's there all in that book, so you can read it, right? there are some very funny chapters as well as some chapters are a bit emotional, but it's a must-read book for mental toughness. I would suggest that. And if you're looking for a career change, and if due to the inflation or due to COVID, if you have lost many things, I would suggest read Swords and Saints, because it's a book. It's with proven results. He became a doctor of medicine at the age of 40. So it's not impossible if you want to make a career change. Just go ahead. Don't be shy, right? Don't be embarrassed. It's just a few years. Success will come for those who chase. And any final comments, Dr. Bob?
So yeah, I do want to have a final comment, because I tell those stories from life experiences, and there are many, many more. But when I look back, and when you ask me to think about leadership, I think what really hit me as a message that I want to share, and it's built into all of those stories, is that if you find yourself in a leadership position, the single most important, and you could see it in the theme of the stories I've already told, is that if you are a leader, you need to think about the people you lead. You need to focus what you do, whether it hurts you or helps you, on the people that you are responsible for. Don't make them make you look good. You make them look good. If you make them look good, they will reward you 10 times over, every single time. And right now in the medical world, I mean, I still see patients, and I still, have to deal with the very frustrating world of United States, organized medicine. I see that failure every day. And what it's doing is it's hurting the patients. And people in the medical leadership world, if you're listening to me, hear what I'm telling you. If you don't focus your efforts on the patient, you're wrong. If you try to take care of your staff and make them look good, you're wrong. You need to be looking at your end stage final responsibility, which is the patient, and make everybody that works for you focus on that. And the organization will be successful, because the patient will reward the doctor, and the doctor will reward your staff.
Absolutely. Very wise words.
Thank you.
And absolutely. And for all those who are watching, learn leadership from Dr. Bob. And this is not the end. We will be continually doing sessions. So Dr. Bob will come with more and more interesting topics in the future. So stay tuned, guys. And thank you, Dr. Bob, once again for taking time and doing this interview with us.
Happy to, Michael. Thank you.